Okay, fantastic. So once again, through the power of social media, looks like we are live. Once again, this is the Wicked Awesome Report, broadcasting every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Give us a comment, a like, a share. Head over to the Facebook page. Give us a like there at Wicked Awesome Report, and you'll be notified next time we are going live. I'm your host, Patrick Queally, and your friend in the mortgage business, joined by my co-host here, Declan O'Toole from Select Real Estate. Good morning, Declan.
Good morning, Patrick. How are you this morning?
Things are great. So I think we've got a real fun topic to talk about today, and I'm sure we'll have a couple of fun little horror stories to go through. So the topic of today's call is what not to do when you're selling your home. Declan, obviously, as a real estate agent, going to be leaning on your expertise for a lot of this stuff. Some of it's common sense, but like I say, common sense isn't that common anymore. So need to say it out loud and give some people that specific instruction on what to do and, more importantly, what not to do. So when we're talking about someone who's ready to list their home, or they're thinking about listing their home, okay, so we'll maybe walk through this in a logical progression, sort of before, during, and after a listing. So if a seller is, the beginning stages thinking about listing the home, what's some of the, biggest mistakes that you think that they should avoid doing when they're in that beginning phase, just thinking about listing a home?
So Patrick, I suppose if you're thinking of listing your home, you have to ask the first question is, why are you listing your home, right? And so I suppose what to do, so you can get back to what you don't do. Why are you listing your home? If you're listing your home because you're moving to a new home, one of the first things you might want to do is don't overlook where you're going, i.e. You may want to be in a position where you know what your transition is going to be. I think that's where, you talk to somebody like yourself where you get the numbers, know if you sell it, you need to get to this number, and then I'll get into the pricing strategies, et cetera, where you need to be. But essentially, you need to have a game plan. So if you don't have a game plan, you're going to have a problem. So one, are you going to list it with a real estate professional? Or are you going to list it yourself? Two, when are you selling it? Where are you moving to? What's your timeline? And you got to watch a lot of those things. I'm getting in a habit here of saying what you should do, but what you shouldn't do. The negatives throw me off a little bit here, Patrick. But
So you shouldn't just you shouldn't go into it without a game plan.
Correct.
Correct. And there are so many what I'll call known unknowns. Okay, so that you're going to list your home.
You don't know what you don't know, Patrick.
Yeah, you know that you're probably going to get an offer. You just don't know what that offer is going to be. So I think at a couple of different key points in the transaction, if you're mapping it all out, putting together a plan, you got to have sort of a decision tree. Okay, right. So if we get the price we want, okay, this is the next thing that happens. If we get a price below what we want, or if we get a price above what we want, sort of deal with all of those various different possible outcomes. And, it very well could look like just a massive whiteboard with all these different plans. But I think, I definitely think working with a real estate professional that's been through it before, again, it's the known unknowns, but working with an agent that has been through it before can narrow down those unknowns and maybe bring them into a tighter range rather than for instance, a sales price, $100,000 range. Well, that's really going to have an impact on what your next step is. So working with an agent, maybe you narrow it down to a $10,000 or $20,000 range in terms of sales price.
Yeah, I'd say so let's say again, and this is not a push to hire professionals. We're going to put it out there. That's a no-brainer to me. But yep. So my point is, if you look at this, all right. So let's just say, without going there, is you have to look at this and either have a spreadsheet, you have a mind map, you've got something. You need to know what A, B, C, all the way through to Z are going to be. At least have an idea. So part of that's going to be pricing, how much you need to do to your property, where are you buying, how long will it take you to find a property, can you afford it if you're buying on the other side. I think then you have to look at it and say, okay, you make a decision. I think first mistake is not talking to somebody, whether it's a real estate professional or it's somebody that you know that's that's in the industry. You need to get, unless you're an expert yourself, get outside advice.
Yeah. So your cousin Fred's best friend's uncle that sold a house back in 1980, that's not someone you should take advice from?
Well, it depends. If you want to have, he can give you advice on how a 1980s kitchen should look. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, absolutely.
Love that avocado green tile.
Exactly. The avocado fridge as well. I love those avocado fridges. They still pop up every so often. So I think, so let's say you do take it on, and or if you're working with a professional, these are the things that you should, that could happen. You could, first off, you shouldn't, when you get a property, you got to get it ready for it to be done. One is you got to look into, don't neglect repairs, stuff, whether it's, and that might be as simple as even replacing tiles when there was a previous issue. Is some of it's cosmetic, but the other part of that is don't spend too much on an upgrade. So if you've got a property and you're looking to sell it, some buyers are looking to do some cosmetic work and make some changes.
Sure.
You could spend $80,000 on repairs, but you might be better off putting it on for 10, 15, 20 below the market. And then
exactly, yeah. So the trade-off there is what's the best return on investment? Do you put that money in and list it at a higher price and make a return on an investment, or do you save maybe the time and the hassle and the money invested in making those repairs, sell it for maybe a little bit less, but still end up with the overall net same dollar in your pocket at the end of the day?
Right. Exactly. And then the other thing is, so let's say you're in that situation. Maybe you've done the repairs. You know what you need to do for repairs. Something similar but a lot less expensive is curb appeal. You need to take care of, trim the trees, put down some fresh mulch, hose the walkways, upgrade maybe some old light fixtures. There's a lot of little things that can happen.
Well, I think especially in today's environment, Declan, sort of this pandemic that we're in, I think that more people are doing their initial drive-bys rather than just, bouncing from open house to open house, because those aren't quite as popular right now. Okay. And people are driving neighborhoods and looking at a home from the outside and making more of a, split decision as to whether or not they actually do want to go in and see the inside based on what it looks from the outside. Does that make sense?
It's interesting you say that, because that kind of brings me back to the other thing is people are also looking at the inside from afar. Mm-hmm. So, I would say, unless you're a professional photographer, don't take your own photographs. I'm a real estate agent. I think I'm good with photos. I don't take photographs.
So you think one of these shouldn't be appropriate for taking real estate photos?
No, actually, if you want to have some fun, there's a property in Boston. I'm not going to say where, but you can look it up. It's about $2.5 million on right now. And I think they listed it by themselves. And there's some photographs that have pictures of screenshots of a phone for pictures of the property. And you'd be surprised. Wonderful. It's only 2.5 million. So I'm sure nobody will care.
Sure.
No, so you are looking at, the photos. Yeah, you basically, there are professional photographers out there, very inexpensive. You're looking at $300, $400, $500, depending on the square footage of property. You can get really good photos. You can get Matterport photos too, which gives a 3D tour of the property. Yeah. They'll even do drones. It makes no sense to put a property on with per photograph.
Yeah. So with more people doing their initial research online, and put the pandemic aside, that was a trend that was already happening, and I think the pandemic has really sort of pushed that over the top. We're finding more people doing their research online. You don't want to have your property represented poorly by having amateur photos at weird angles and screenshots of cell phone pictures. You want to have the right sort of best foot forward representation to initially present the home to prospective buyers.
Yeah, and the other thing is, let's say you can take good photographs. They're not as good as a professional will do. And, just go online. You'll see the difference between a home, even that's taken, so maybe it's not a terrible photograph, but maybe it doesn't get the perspective right or the right light.
The right lighting, or so I can definitely see the difference between the professional photos and the amateur real estate agent or homeowner that's taking their own photos. There is a huge difference.
The next thing I suppose is kind of tied to that is if a photographer can't make your house look better in terms of if you haven't got it staged properly, or if you haven't taken care of some of the basics, which is decluttering, right? It's the first thing I say. It's I go into my own house. If I was putting my property on the market, it's the first thing I do. There's a few things, you got
to put the kids out in the shed and back and let them make a mess back there rather than in the sitting room. Yep.
Exactly.
That's first rule of decluttering. Yep.
And lock the shed.
Yeah, there you
go. But it's and part of it. So there's decluttering. There's family portraits. There's the other thing is branding teams. For instance, I love our Red Sox, love the Patriots.
Yeah.
I'm also Irish, so you might have there aren't too many Irish flags or shamrocks in my home, but just to use that as an example.
Yeah. Well, I got one of these in the background here. So.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, I see that. I actually see the picture. Yeah. The picture is quite nice behind you. But so when all said and done is if people come through. A Yankees fan's not going to appreciate somebody's moving from New York, and maybe they're a Mets fan. They're not going to appreciate all the Red Sox paraphernalia.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short is you don't want to show your strong political affiliations, cultural flavors, brands. It's their home. Somebody walks into a home, you almost want to give them a blank slate, but make it tasteful. So you walk in. I'm not saying get rid of all of grandma's photographs, but just you don't want to have it plastered with photographs of your family and your memories.
It's not a shrine to the grandkids in one corner of the house with 500 family photos. No, I get it. Yeah.
So that's basically that's one thing. So once you've decluttered, once you've kind of and again, if you speak to somebody, if you're not working with a professional, certainly speak to somebody from outside. They can see your house. Fresh set of eyes can tell you where to go. Yep. The other part of that then is with the house, if you, kind of going back to if you're making some repairs, but even if you're not, neutral colors. I would not, I'm colorblind, so I would not be the person to tell you what actual colors, but I can tell you.
I was going to say something about your shirt there, Declan, but
I snuck past the wife on the way down today. So, sorry, honey. So I mean when it comes to it is you don't want to have garish colors, anything that's too bright. They're more than likely to going to paint over, put their own, but certainly neutral colors.
Sure.
And you don't want anything too
And I think that's probably one of the fastest, easiest, and least expensive ways to prep a home for sale, a fresh coat of paint. And if you're going to do that, like I said, not any wild, crazy colors, a neutral palette.
Yeah. 100%. The other part of that is if you give a fresh coat of paint to your house on the inside, it also helps with odors, which is another thing to talk about.
Right.
Pets, etc. It just gives it not only does it give it a fresh look, it gives a fresh smell to the house.
Sure.
Not the paint smell, but it tends to get rid of other odors.
No, absolutely. So that's sort of the before. So getting ready to list the home. All great tips on what to do and, more importantly, what not to do. Let's talk about once the home actually is listed for sale. So we've got sort of the before, during, and after. So let's move on to the during. So you've decided to list your home. You've done some of the cleanup and maintenance and decluttering and painting. Now, the home is listed either by yourself or with a real estate professional. One thing
we're thinking of, and you might be getting to it, Patrick, is pricing it. So it had to be
okay. Well, there you go. So there's one more important step there before you list it. Is pricing it. So you have to make sure that it's priced appropriately, because it can be the most beautiful home in the world, but if it's just way overpriced, it's going to sit. And if it's underpriced, well, as a seller, you're missing out on potential dollars there you could be putting in your pocket.
Well, Patrick, the single worst thing you can do is make an emotional price decision. If you price it wrong, you're going to end up chasing the market. So that's one thing for certain. And it's not just about how much. So part of that is first you do a comparable market analysis. Again, this is where I think a professional can help you. But you need to look at also research the competition, right? See what's out there. You can look at price, and I can spend a day on pricing, so I won't get too much into it. But price per square foot, is it similar to the others? Another property might be a higher price, but it might be a much bigger property.
Sure.
The yard, the lot. So there's ways to actually price the actual pricing. Then the question is, what's the price you listed at? You may find, so for instance, if you think your property is worth, I'm going to throw a number out there. Let's say it's $507,000 is the number you came up with.
Yep.
It might actually make sense to put it on for $495 or $499. Part of that is because when people are pricing a property, you're looking at people look at a range, right? 500,000 or less, 525.
Right. Yeah. So as a buyer, you may self-impose a limit. I'm not going to look at anything more than 500,000. So
Right.
as a seller, you may attract more buyers by listing at 499.9 because you're getting all the people that have that self-imposed limit of 500. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to get that 507 you want. I think you're just opening yourself up to a greater collection of the population that may self-impose that 500 limit. Is that?
Yeah. So
right?
Yeah. So here's kind of my thing too. This is where, again, I'm not going to tell you if you've got a house you think is worth 507, put it on for 495 or 499. Reason I say that is this is where, again, using a professional, you might know, maybe the number is 419, and particularly in a market like this where you can actually get the right. So it's not always price cheaper is not always the answer, right? Okay. So again, this is where if you got somebody that knows that market, knows what somebody's willing to pay, knows where the pricing is trending, the number might be higher. Or maybe we put it higher for a week, see where it goes. One thing you don't want to do is have the property on the market for 30 days or longer. Once you hit 30 days, that's typically people look at it. If you see 30 days or more, I myself, when I'm looking at a property, I see 30 days.
What's wrong with it?
Yeah, exactly. It's human nature. So you need to be able to price it right, be able to hit the market. It's not always a lower price. Yes, that's part of it, and that's why I said that is slightly underneath the price. Now I've seen advice out there saying, well, price it at an unusual number. So instead of 499,900, 497, $343. Now that it's interesting. It's an interesting one. Something like that, I think you're getting way too. You're outsmarting yourself. People will go, "What is going on with this person?"
Yeah.
Very helpful in a negotiation when you go back. And I'm giving away a couple of tricks of the trade. Yeah. You go back to somebody in negotiation, and you give an odd number.
You give a real specific number. Yeah. So it makes somebody think, well, there was a lot of thought put into how they came up with that number.
Correct. Yeah. But you don't, not on the very first listing of that. I've seen it happen too. And it's like, okay, what's, is they throwing in an extra light fixture there? I mean, why is that on? So, but that's so don't believe everything you're told about pricing either. So I suppose.
Right. So I guess the major takeaway there is you got to have a competent professional that is familiar with the market, that understands pricing and pricing trends, in order to get the right price for your home, so it doesn't sit there and hit that 30-day mark on the market, and everyone's wondering, well, what the hell's wrong with this place? It's been sitting here.
Right. It was put on at the wrong price. Okay. Assuming that the photographs are good and the curb appeal is good and you've done your repairs.
Well, exactly. Everything we've talked about, to get to the point of listing it, the curb appeal, the minor repairs, the fresh paint, the professional photographs. All things that you want to do. So let's move on then to, you've agreed on that listing price. You've got the right pricing strategy. The home is currently listed either by yourself, which I don't always recommend, would prefer to see people working with, a competent real estate professional to help guide them, through the whole transaction. But up to that point, property is now listed for sale. As the seller of the home, what are you telling those sellers to not do?
Hide some of the faults. So that might seem counterintuitive, right? Okay. So when we list the property on the market, we have a seller's disclosure form. It's illegal. Well, so basically that discloses where all the different things, all the good things. It's a great way of pointing out how nice your property is. It depends on how you use it, right? Because it displays all the things, and so. If you've got, for instance, there's a Maybe you have moisture that comes up in the basement because of the ground level water during a heavy rainstorm. Put that on the disclosure. Because what's going to happen is if you don't disclose something and you have a home inspection, or even if you don't have a home inspection that comes up later, first off, there's minor issues can cause you an issue with regard. So it takes negotiation off the table down the road. So if you disclose things, you don't draw attention necessarily to them, but you disclose them. That puts you in a situation where you're like, we're selling the house, and this is what we're selling it with, and this is what we're selling it. It's almost like when you say you're not selling it with a certain appliance, right? You're saying we're selling it. It does have this.
You're getting the full list of everything that's included. You know, the Dan's basement is included in the sales price.
It's up front. We're putting it on at this price with this moisture in the basement, right? Get a dehumidifier, but this is what we're selling it as. Yep. They come in and you do a home inspection or something else. Now, it may still come up, and that's all part of the game. But long story short, you disclosed it. There won't be any surprise. The less surprises there are for a buyer, the more smooth your transaction is going to go. And you'd be surprised. You're not necessarily devaluing the house. You list those things. Then people say, okay, I know it's got this. I know it's got that. I've seen situations where they don't do a home inspection because they say, well, at least this person was upfront with the items. I think I'm comfortable with the home.
And I would tend to think that, if you don't list it and then it's found out in the home inspection, the buyer might think, well, okay, so we found this out. What else is the seller hiding? It sort of opens up concerns to what else may be there that they don't initially see.
Right, exactly. And it's just one of those things. It just keeps things on track. It makes it much easier for you down the road to have, and it's just a more comfortable situation for you and the buyer as well. The less inclined.
Great. Yeah. So don't hide any of the property conditions. So that's a good point. Now, what about showings? Always a great idea to have the seller, sitting in the sitting room, drinking their coffee or having a beer during the open house, right?
100%. No, absolutely. Because then they can tell them the things they know about the house, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they can tell them everything, and where little Johnny fell and scraped his knee, on the stairs, and all those stories. Yeah, no, it's I've certainly in the business been at a number of open houses, and on a rare occasion, the seller is there, or even better, the seller is parked in their car in front of the house or across the street, watching it, and it just kind of looks weird.
Yeah, it's like you're there with
awkward. Yeah, it's like they're on a stakeout trying to figure out, exactly how many people and how long do they spend in the house and so forth.
Yeah, there's a couple of things to that. One is if somebody's going through your home, and you want them to be able to, because I know certainly myself, I'm involved with showing a property. I don't do the shoe salesman person necessarily, but I give them a little bit of room, let them critique items. So at least what they like and don't like. And you'll be surprised. They can come back around and you can then address those at the right time, maybe a little later in the showing. So one is the buyer is going to feel a lot more comfortable going through the home if they think that somebody's watching them, and they're not going to get first the true experience.
They've got their guard up and they're looking over their shoulder rather than taking a look at the property itself.
It's not comfortable, and they may not bring up items that could be addressed, right? So they'll walk back out, they'll disappear. You never knew there was a problem, and you wonder why they didn't make an offer. Yeah. The other part of that is we've all got a little bit of it. We've all got egos. So somebody goes through your house, and they're uncomfortable with something, they don't like a paint color, so or the shamrocks that you're up on the wall, whatever it happens to be, it's very hard to not get defensive if you're the homeowner and you're there and you're going to want to explain straight away, and it's just
exactly like you said earlier. Real estate can be emotional, so as the competent real estate professional, it's not that you don't care. I know you care about your clients deeply, but it's your job to be the disinterested third party. You're not, emotionally attached to the property. It wasn't your little Johnny that fell and scraped his knee there, or, that's not, where your kids took their first steps, or you taught your daughter to bake muffins, or, whatever it is in the house. You're there as a competent professional and can address questions and concerns. And I guess, a detached manner, I guess, rather than, the homeowner that's emotionally tied to the real estate and everything that's happened there, during the course of ownership.
Right. Exactly. So steer clear of the home inspection.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
I think then I suppose if you get through that process, right, you get through your pricing, you get through the curb, making sure the property looks the part, you've staged it correctly. So the next thing is, hopefully you have somebody coming through and they make an offer.
Yep.
So there's a number of things that can go right. Again, we could do several episodes on this side of things, but I suppose one of the first things I'm thinking, Patrick, is when you get offers, again, this comes down to the emotional thing, is don't necessarily steer away from even lowball offers. You'll be surprised.
Yep.
You because somebody made an offer. Again, if you take yourself out of it, you can always hold off, but you don't ignore them. Once you get an offer on the table, it's easier then to get other offers. There's something about getting that first piece of paper in the door.
Sure.
I'll give you an example. I had a property myself where now it was at the higher price range, but somebody made a lowball offer on the property. It took me about 2 months. It was a higher dollar amount, as I said, but I got the guy up $279,000. So you'll be surprised.
Yeah. It's just negotiating. So a first offer, expresses interest.
Right.
So the first offer isn't a final offer. It's an opening bid, if you will.
Correct. The first is not the final, and if it is, then so be it. That's that buyer. But take that first offer, and I would say just again, emotions. If you keep your emotions out of it, you can always. It's a business decision, and you can negotiate with what you have.
Yeah, and again, another good reason to hire a real estate professional, again, to be that disinterested third party, to just take a look at the dollars and cents and the other components of the offer. And we've spent some shows talking about different offer structures and different items in that offer. So as the competent professional, it's your job to analyze all of those and present the pros and cons to the seller, rather than having them take an emotional reaction to whatever's on that offer.
And the other thing is then kind of you hit on it, which is price isn't always what you're looking for, right? Yep. So you're buying that other home. Maybe you need extra time to actually make a purchase. Maybe to make it so that it's contingent on you finding a home. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you need to get out as soon as possible, so less mortgage payment, $5,000 or something, but there's an extra 2 months that you have to stay in the house because of the deal. Maybe there's no home inspection and it's an 1870s home. There's so many different aspects to it. You got to look at it, analyze it, and then see where you want to be based on conditions, not just the price.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's the advice there is don't make an emotional decision when you're reviewing the offers that come in.
And look at all aspects of the offer. The other part of that too is you read through an offer again, and some professionals miss it too, is sometimes there's extra conditions in that offer. You got to make sure you read the small print as well. Yeah.
So don't just look at the dollar amount. There are other terms of the offer. Okay.
Correct.
Any other advice sort of in that during phase while the home is listed that you wanted to touch on, other things to do and don't do for the seller? Or do you think that covers it?
I think we've pretty much covered it. There's again, we can go on about we can get into some of the same stuff we've looked at, but I think that's a pretty good in terms of just that showings. It's about staging, it's about pricing, I think we've covered most of those items there.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next stage, which I think will be the sort of the final stage that we'll talk about in today's show, is after. So after the offer has been accepted, people can do some funny things. Now, on my side, on the mortgage end of things, I've seen people just do some, I don't say stupid things, but stupid things once they've had an offer accepted. So, they're moving towards signing that purchase and sales agreement. One of the items that I always advise a client to do is to have that purchase and sales agreement reviewed with your attorney before you sign it. Not to scare anybody, but that purchase and sales agreement, that's a legally binding contract. So if you're going to put pen to paper and sign that, you really need to understand it. And I mean, I look at, purchase and sales agreements all day, every day in the course of my business. And I know you do too, Declan. So,
Yeah.
but reviewing a purchase and sales and looking at the terms, trying to help a client structure financing is different than, me signing a purchase and sales myself on a property I'm buying or selling. And I'll tell everybody, I won't sign a purchase and sales on something I'm buying or selling until my attorney tells me it's okay. Even though I'm looking at these contracts all day, every day for clients, I got to make sure that, your own interests are protected before you put pen to paper. So I guess the big don't there is don't sign the contract until you've had it reviewed with the correct professional. And in Massachusetts, I'd say that's a real estate conveyancing attorney.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Better safe than sorry, as they say.
Yeah. So one of the other silly or stupid things I've seen people do is once they've signed a contract to sell their home, so they have a purchase and sales agreement signed, they've got a closing date that's 30, 45, 60 days out in the future, they're selling that home. Well, why do I need to make my mortgage payment? I'm selling this home and I'm going to be gone in 30 days. So please, even if you're selling a home, pay the mortgage payments as they come due, okay? Because in the real world, stuff happens. The buyer's financing may fall through. There may be, a title issue that's discovered or just some other delay that pushes that 30-day closing down to 60 or 90 days in the future. And if you aren't making mortgage payments for 90 days, well, you get bigger problems because your lender technically could issue a notice of default. Which is going to create all sorts of complications with you going ahead to be able to sell that home at the end of the day. So don't stop keeping up with your obligations when it comes to that home. Mortgage payment, real estate taxes, homeowners insurance, even though you're under contract to sell it, you're still responsible for what those obligations are until the transfer actually happens when you're sitting at the closing table.
Absolutely. I know it's sort of a small one, but a big one, that the purchase and sale, just to harken back to that a little bit, is make sure that checks are collected. Now, in this case, you're probably a professional. It's an escrow. It's either a real estate agent or it's an attorney, but a purchase and sale is not executed until the money's in the bank. So that's just a minor one to touch on why we were talking about that. But yeah, you're right. You don't think that you don't live in a different world just because you've signed a purchase and sale. A lot of deals fall through after the purchase and sale as well.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, so you have a contract signed and, something happens. So you think you're selling the home and you're going to be at a closing table in 45 days. Maybe you don't have a lot of cash to work with until the home is sold. So you take the money that normally would have gone for a mortgage payment and you go and you spend it on something else.
Right.
Well, if the closing gets delayed, you still have to make that mortgage payment, but your money is spent. So again, just sort of business as usual when it comes to paying your obligations until you're sitting at the closing table.
Yeah, and then after speaking of business as usual, if you're on the seller side, either you or the person you're working with need to look at a couple of items that need to be taken care of, and I've seen it happen. Not too often, but I have seen it where people overlook some things that need to be done on that side of the table, which is make sure you get a final water read. Title 5, that'll probably come up, which is your septic system, but also that your smokes and CO detectors, one, are working, are up to date, and they get inspected. So you need to get a certification from the fire department. Do it well on time. Once the purchase and sale is signed, I'd be calling the fire department. And then making sure you get a water read. They say day of closing. I always make sure it's 1-2 days beforehand, just in case something happens. Even if the closing gets moved up, you have to schedule that.
Yeah, and typically when you're working with a real estate professional, those are the checklist items that they're all working through. Now, as a home seller, you should absolutely double check and make sure the agent is actually doing those. Okay, but in a typical transaction, Declan, safe to assume that those are all things that the real estate agent has on their checklist of items to do to make sure it gets done.
Yeah, so it'll be on the checklist, but I would say just if you're talking, let's put it this way, if you haven't gotten an email saying the smoke has certificates done and here's a copy of it, we bring an original to the closing, then there's a chance it hasn't been done. So again, just don't take anything for granted.
So the big don't is there. Don't take it for granted. Don't assume that the real estate agent is taking care of it. because they may not be.
Right.
What if it's that real estate agent's very first transaction and they don't know what they don't know? Okay.
Right.
So everybody's going to start somewhere. I get it. But, as the seller, you want to make sure that, the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. So you should work with a competent professional, but don't just sit back and sort of abdicate responsibility and assume that, that person is just going to take care of everything. And it's rainbows and unicorns until you reach the closing table. It's not always the case.
There's one other item, again, it's based on those contingencies, is when you get to a purchase and sale, most sales transactions, Patrick, come with a mortgage contingency.
Yep.
Part of that, there's an appraisal that's typically done on the property. Of course, we went through this in the previous podcast, that they're not necessarily always going through the property. Yep. But with the appraisal, we had we had Alan Weiner on here previously. Right, yeah. Speaking of appraisals, is to have a list. If you've got made improvements to your property, and maybe it's not there on the listing sheet, I would get a list. I would make it available to the appraiser and or your real estate professionals, every single item you've done to improve that property. Mm-hmm. So he might have a situation where maybe it appraises 5,000-10,000 below the number that you're selling it at, but then he sees, hold on a second, put in a new kitchen, even in addition, maybe new windows,
new roof, new furnace and water heater. So all the improvements. So I think the takeaway there is, again, just don't assume that everybody else that's going through the property sees the work or the improvements that you haven't made. It doesn't hurt to point those out. And by pointing those out, I don't mean standing over the person's shoulder and saying, look, that's a brand new water heater. You put together a list and make sure it's available to the appropriate people.
If you're a real estate professional, salesperson, or a broker watching this show, I'm going to highly recommend, and in fact, I think it's foolish not to, make sure you have your comps. Get a list of get a bunch of comps. Know your property, know the difference. Put in at least 3. Actually, I usually put in 4 or 5. So there's a couple that can use, something they can use.
Yep.
Because the appraiser is going to want a copy of the purchase and sale, so you can see the pricing, see what the conditions are, etc. And you don't push it on them, but it's as I think, as Alan said, 50% take them, 50% don't. But it will help. Again, they're not always from. If you're from Watertown and the appraiser happens to be from Andover, they may not quite know the Watertown
Sure.
market. So that's just something worth considering.
Yep. Yeah. So again, don't assume. Have your checklist, have the information ready for anyone that's going to need it. Don't just assume that they've gathered all the correct information themselves. So any other things to not do while the home is under agreement?
I think that's from my perspective. I think I think a lot of it then is really on your end, on the financing and making sure that you keep your insurance up. A lot of it's sort of the documentation stuff.
Yep.
So I'd say just don't take anything for granted. I would say they're sort of the key points that I have in terms of what you need to watch out for.
Yeah, you don't assume. Ask the questions, even if you think you know the answer. Ask the question and get confirmation. As competent professionals on the mortgage side of things, and Declan on the real estate side of things, I can say for sure, I never take offense to a client, asking or double checking, hey, did XYZ happen? Are you sure that you have this? It shows me that they're, conscientious, responsible consumers, and they're looking for a smooth transaction as well, which is what, Declan, I think both of us want to deliver in every case. So if you're watching the show, you can't, don't be afraid to ask the professional the question. Look, the professionals work for you. You're the one that's hired them. So they have to answer to you. So ask those questions if you're not sure. Again, even if you think you know the answer, ask anyway, just get that full confirmation.
And then as you get closer to the closing table, Patrick, a couple of things. One is, seem obvious, make sure you book the movers for the right day to get all your stuff out.
Yeah.
And make sure, and again, I would highly recommend, even if you're doing, closings on the same day, I would recommend moving out before the day of the closing, and you'll
give yourself a couple of days buffer.
You're going to clean the property. most purchase and sales have broom clean condition, which means you've
Yep.
brought a broom through it and it's expected to be nice and clean. Buyers will do a final walkthrough before they go to closing.
Yep.
And it does happen. There are issues. I've seen closings being held up because, it wasn't in broom clean condition.
The sellers haven't moved out yet.
They haven't moved out, or they're, the last minute, we've all moved before, right? It always takes longer than you think it will.
Yeah.
So
you never realize how much just crap you have until you gotta box it all up and put it in a truck.
That's right. That's right. If you're smart about it, sort it before you move. But that's not my problem, but just
exactly. Yeah. So maybe circling back to the first stage of decluttering and getting rid of things that you don't want to box up and take with you.
Right. Right.
All right. So I think we've covered quite a bit of good advice here, sort of the before, during, and after you put your home under agreement or you're looking to sell. So some key points here. The before is enhancing the curb appeal, cleaning the property up, making some repairs, painting, getting professional pictures, and pricing strategies. Okay. During is don't be at the property during an open house. If you're the seller, let the real estate agent that you've hired, do their job. And when offers come in, don't react emotionally to whatever that offer is. And there's more to the offer. Don't just look at the dollar amount. I think that covers the during, and sort of after you've accepted an offer and you have a contract. Well, I guess before you sign that contract, don't just sign it blindly. Make sure you get it reviewed by an attorney before you sign it, again, because it's a legal contract. And don't forget to keep up with your current obligations. Make your mortgage payment, make your taxes, keep the property insured, because you're still responsible until you hit the closing table and that deed is transferred. So don't forget about keeping up with your obligations, and don't abdicate responsibility. Okay. Don't just take a back seat, even though you've hired a real estate agent or a mortgage loan officer to help you with, your next transaction or completing this transaction. Don't just assume that everything is going well. You don't have to be a nervous Nelly about it, but ask the questions, just make sure everything's on track. Don't assume that everybody else is always doing their job, because, hey, everybody has a bad day. Everybody drops a ball now and again. So be your own best advocate and ask the questions. Yep. So before, during, and after, I think that's a pretty good summary to wrap up with. I think that covers it, Declan.
Yeah, I would say the only other thing I would say is we're on don'ts and nots. Don't not hire a proper real estate professional to work with you.
Well, exactly. That's don't go it alone.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Hire somebody knowledgeable, competent, that's familiar with the market area, that can guide you through each one of those stages. Because again, sort of that decision tree, the known unknowns, so many things could go sideways on you. And you need to have, in my opinion, you need to have that competent real estate professional to keep it on the rails. Okay. Because, analogy I've used before, we're not building Model T Fords here. It's not an assembly line. Every single transaction is going to have some different twists and turns, but you need to have that competent professional to keep it as close to that assembly line as possible, so that you'll hit all the major components and everything comes together at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So let's wrap it up then. So another edition of the Wicked Awesome Report. I'm your host, Patrick Queally, and your friend in the mortgage business, joined by my co-host, Declan O'Toole from Select Real Estate, broadcasting every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. or 10-ish, depending on our technical difficulties. I think we got on just about on time today. So thanks for tuning in. Head over to the Facebook page for Wicked Awesome Report. Give us a like, a thumbs up over there, a comment, and you'll be notified next time we do broadcast. Again, it's every Tuesday and Thursday. So until the next edition, Declan, thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next time around. And hope everybody out there stays well. And tradition with the Wicked Awesome Report, hope everybody stays awesome. Take care.